Welcome, welcome, welcome to the new and improved and exciting Live from NCCE. We are here today with the amazing Mary Hoffmeister. Mary has a master's in educational technology. She has been a Microsoft Innovative Educator expert since 2014 and a Minecraft Global Mentor since 2018. She is a Fulbright Distinguished Award in Teaching alumnus, 2014 Museum of Aviation National STEM Teacher of the Year, and my dear friend who's here to talk about Makecode for the end of the year. Mary, how are we going to end the year with Makecode? Tell us how to do it.
So, Tammy, we're going to look at some really spectacular things in Makecode that teachers can use tomorrow in their classroom. So that's the beauty of Makecode, is that they have made that entire interface super easy to use. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I am at and you can also follow Makecode and NCCE using the hashtags and information on the screen. So let's get started. So we're going to start by just talking a little bit about what exactly is Makecode. So Makecode is a completely free, open source, and web-based coding tool that you can use on any device. I have used it on iPads, I have used it on Chromebooks, I have used it on computers. If you have a modern web browser, Makecode's going to work for your students, and that is such a beautiful thing. No need to install anything, and it just works. The thing that I really love about Makecode is that it gives your students a real world coding progression. It starts with that block-based coding language, but then students can move up through JavaScript and Python as their skills and abilities allow them, and learn to use a variety of different ways to use those languages. So that's kind of Makecode in a nutshell. There are a lot of different ways we can use Makecode because Makecode has a lot of different options for how you can use it. The first one is Makecode Arcade, which is what we're going to look at first, which is how to make kind of a retro game. There's a really fun add-in to that called Makecode Arcade Stenciler that's going to allow us to add some crafting connections to our coding, which I think is fabulous. I'm going to give you a quick look at Makecode in Minecraft because the coding that is embedded in Minecraft actually is built on the same Makecode engine. So it uses that same language progression of blocks to JavaScript to Python. And then we're going to take a look at Makecode Microbit, because even if I don't have a microbit, my students can use that coding simulator to learn and make their own content. There are other editors with Makecode, and these are things that use like Chibi Chips and the Q robot from Wonder Workshop. There is a Makecode that you can use to program Legos Mindstorms EV3s, and there's also one for the Circuit Playground Express. We're not going to look at those today, but I wanted you to know that they do exist and they're pretty spectacular. So Makecode Arcade, that's not a tongue twister at all, right? So it is a programming environment where you can actually create games and play them on a retro gaming simulator. There are tutorials that are there for you to go through, and we'll look at some of those in just a second. And what's really amazing about these tutorials is that they are sometimes simple, just step by step, but then they also have multi-part tutorials, which I like to call choose your own adventure tutorials, because you're creating a game, and as you create that game, you can choose what you want to do at your next step. So, and I totally, nerdy kid, love to make choose your own adventure books. It makes me happy that I can use coding to choose your own adventure, right? So let's take a look, and we're going to go to arcade.makecode.com, and I know that that has been put in the chat for you, and you have had it pop up on the screen, but this is the Arcade Makecode page. You'll see that it starts out with a project viewer, and it's going to show things that I've opened. I intentionally cleaned this out because my projects on Makecode before today had like 5 million scrolls over here, because anything that I've ever programmed on this device will show up in that window. But then underneath that, you'll see that I have tutorials, and there are a lot of tutorials here. I can make a game called Chase the Pizza, and that it very simply, following the steps, can program the entire thing. Those multi-part tutorials, the ones that I was talking about that were like the choose your own adventure, my favorite of that is Shark Attack, because I can decide how I'm going to change that Shark Attack game to customize it. Do I want to award points, or do I want to take them away? What do I want to do with that? And it walks you through that coding progression. Additionally, underneath that, you'll see that there are live coding activities hosted by members of the Makecode team. And what's really cool is because of COVID and them having, ample opportunities with their children at home, a lot of these tutorials feature the Makecode team with their children walking through these different activities. So you can actually get that live coding experience following the tutorials that are here. Underneath that, you'll see games that you can change the content in and customize as you get more familiar. There's also games that are written strictly in JavaScript, so these can only be modified in that way. Game Jam is a place where they share games that have been created. And then there are advanced live streams to help you figure out more difficult concepts or how to do different types of games. The community games is a game exchange where you can see games that other people have created. There are game design concepts. And then there are even some graphics and math activities where you can use Makecode to look at paintbrushes and how to make a fireworks exhibit. And, if you really want to be nerdy, you can sort some algorithms and it'll teach you how to program that. Underneath that, there's some arts and crafts, and we're going to come back to that in just a minute because I'm going to show you an extension with that. And then, teachers, there are lessons that you can use to do a lesson on computational thinking and coding. There are courses that your students can go through a computer science intro completely using Makecode. So this content is all here, and you see it just keeps going. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you see what this interface looks like if I start one of the very simple tutorials. If I start Chase the Pizza, you'll see that it gives me the option of blocks, JavaScript, or Python. I'm going to start with blocks because that's going to be our most accessible for everyone right now, but know that at any point, I can go back and change that language. In every Makecode tutorial, it's going to start with this little video that tells me what I'm going to do. I do love, check it out, Microsoft Immersive Reader right there. So for our students that need that Immersive Reader assistance, they can launch Immersive Reader within this content in Makecode and get the assistance that they need. So I go through, it's going to give me the directions for the tutorial that tell me exactly what I need to do to program this game. You'll see here on the left-hand side is my game emulator. So I can actually play the game on here once I get it programmed. And I can even view that full screen and it'll go wide. So I do have some neat options there for how to do that. I also want to draw your attention to the fact that once the game is complete, you can download it, and then that game just runs as an executable on a computer, or you can share it and someone can load it into their own Makecode to customize and change it. The containers for the programs that you need are all going to be here on the side. What I love about this in the tutorial version is that it only gives me the containers that I need, so I'm not overwhelmed by everything. I'm going to exit the tutorial now, but you can see I can go through it. It's going to give me hints as I need them, but I'm going to exit the tutorial now because I want you to see what it looks like if I'm not in a tutorial. So this is actually a game that I made for some students in my school district when I was teaching them about Christmas in New Zealand. So it's called a Kiwi Christmas, and it's just a very silly, I'm going to stop it because the sound is kind of obnoxious, but it's a silly little game where they're going to help the Christmas kiwi collect the Pahukatawa flowers, which are flowers that bloom in New Zealand around Christmas time. Of course, their Christmas is during the summer. So the students got to play this game as a part of their lesson on that. But what you'll see is I have a lot more containers for program here. And at any point, I can change this to JavaScript to see the entire JavaScript code for this. Or I can even change it to Python. So I can see what those languages look like. Great way for students to start developing that skill of changing into those different programming languages. I'm going to go back to blocks because we're going to need this in just a minute for something that I'm going to show you. But I love that they can play the game here, and they really love to play the game on touchscreen devices because then it's like they're playing an old-fashioned Game Boy, and it's fabulous. To share content, you simply hit share, and you'll get once you publish it, it's going to give you a Makecode link, and that Makecode link can be shared. You can share it as a QR code, and you can embed it in different learning management systems or on websites, which I think is a really great way to use that tool. So that is kind of the Makecode Arcade system. in a really quick overview. But let's take a look because there's a little bonus here that I've included here for you to see. And that's the Makecode Hour of Code tutorials from the previous year. Some of these you'll see buried in the other tutorials, but if we go to arcade.makecode.com/hour of code, it takes us to the 2020 Hour of Code site. And here we get 3 different options. Remember, I talked about the Shark Attack game, which was that choose your own adventure Shark Attack option. So this is still here, and this is still great for me to use with students because these are ready out of the box things to do. But I did want to point out the 2 other options they had, one which was design and another which was play. The design option for Design the Clovers, students start with a programmed, ready to go game, and then they get the option to customize it to make it fit whatever theme they want. This is a great end of year activity to have students really be able to look at a complete game and customize it to fit a theme. I've had students take this and make a game that revolves around like a history lesson they have done or something like that. So it does give you that option, and that's here on that Hour of Code page under design. Play is just a traditional kind of the old school Hour of Code tutorials, if you remember any of those. This is that idea of I have a sprite or a character and I want them to move to accomplish certain tasks, and I have to use arrows as my programming language for that sprite. So these are great. They have an educator guide here for you to get more information about the activities, and they also have some additional activities. A lot of these, like Chase the Pizza, are on that main page. But I did want to share this, particularly because of that Design the Clovers, because it gives you a great way for students to easily customize a game, even if the programming part of Makecode is a little bit more of a struggle for them. They still get the opportunity to finish a complete game product that they have designed without getting bogged down if the coding gets them stuck. Sometimes I will use that as a remediation activity for students that are really struggling to complete the coding on something like the Shark Attack game, but they still want to end the process with a game of their own. So this gives us a good option for that because they're still working in that code interface. They're still customizing the code, but they're given a little bit more help to get started there. So that is Makecode Arcade. So let's shift back here and let's take a look at, this is kind of my added bonus. This is something that I just discovered, and it has made me really excited about the potential for what you can do with it. Makecode Arcade has a stenciler, and what it allows you to do is I can take any character from one of my Makecode games. So I'm going to take my Christmas Kiwi here because he's so incredibly cute, right? And if I take the marquee tool, which is just our selection, right? And I select my Christmas Kiwi. I'm going to select him, and I just want that part. And I'm going to hit copy or Control C. And I copy him, and I come back to the stenciler. If I click here and hit Control V, now you'll see I should have my Kiwi pop in here. Let me delete everything and do that one more time. And then if I hit generate, there is my Christmas Kiwi. But y'all, what it's giving me with that is a pattern, the pixel pattern here. And if I keep going, it gives me the pattern to create that out of bead art, that exact design. There's even a way that I can take this bead art, this design, and put it into a knitting or a cross stitch pattern using this tool. But if I keep going, and those of you that know me or are familiar with me at all know that I love some Legos. You can see behind me, I've got some Lego business happening here. You can actually use these patterns to create whatever your pixel drawing is in Lego bricks. And it gives you the step-by-step with the colors of bricks that best match what your colors that you selected in your Makecode item were. So I think that that is a really cool and very neat way for students to combine their art and their Makecode, because you're getting that idea of a pixel drawing, but then you're able to expand it and change it out. And it makes some choices in the knitting and in the Legos with the colors that are actually in the item. So I think that that is a really cool way to have some physical crafting activity along with that virtual, because they're creating that image and then they're able to create it itself in a 3D form. So I think that that is a really neat kind of bonus. Again, that is the Makecode Arcade Stenciler, and that is in the chat so that you can access that. And it works with any image from your Makecode game. So I could even copy like one of my backgrounds, which would be a much larger file, and I could create that in that way as well. I'm just going to touch on this because it's not a session with me without a little bit of Minecraft. Minecraft, the engine that uses the coding inside the game of Minecraft Education Edition, has a it uses the Makecode situation. But additionally, they do have a web-based version of this where I can go through a tutorial in Minecraft's coding environment. The only thing is I have to open it in Minecraft to test it. But again, just like that previous tutorial, it starts with a video. It tells me what I'm going to code my game to do. And then once I get started, I have only the coding containers I need here, and I have the commands that I want to start with, and it's a step-by-step tutorial with hints throughout to tell me exactly what I need to do. Now, when I'm in the game of Minecraft, I hit play and I apply that, and it goes right in and starts happening in the game. And I can do that from here or from within the game of Minecraft by pressing the C button. But I wanted to point that out because that could be a really great way to have your students use coding in Minecraft to build something at the end of the year. It's a great way to extend that learning because every kid gets excited about Minecraft. So if you have access to Minecraft Education Edition, I encourage you to check that out. Our next coding adventure here is the Makecode Microbit. The Makecode Microbit it's a programming language you can use to program microbits. Microbits are very simple computers that you can purchase for about, everything's priced differently right now, right? But they're usually between $20 and $30, and you can buy them from a variety of vendors. But the really cool thing about the Makecode Microbit is I can do this. I don't have a microbit upstairs with me right now in my office, but I can actually go in to Microbit through this demo file, and I'll show you a little more in a moment. But I can say what I want to have happen. And just like before, where we had that video game emulator that we could play the game on, I have a mini microbit that I can use to demo my program. So I very simply this afternoon just made a code that said on start, I wanted it to repeat these steps 4 times, and I wanted it just to show these LEDs kind of in a warp pattern. So when I hit start, it's going to do that, right? It's going to do that 4 times. But I can also say, okay, I don't want this to happen anymore. But when I press button A, I want a, let's go here. I want to show a check mark. And then when button B is pressed, I want to show, oops, let's go back to the right thing. I want to show an X. So if I send this to the microbit, if I press A, I get a check. If I press B, I get an X. So students are able to interact and work through that coding with this without actually having that device. Now, there are some of the things that they may want to do with the device that aren't going to work without the physical device. But for the most part, most of the input programming that we're going to do, we can do straight from here without the device. Again, I can save and download these, and I can share these just like any of the others. The other thing with Microbit here again, we've got those tutorials, right? Everything in Makecode has these tutorials. But I also have some live coding lessons that show the ways that I can do different things. There are games that you can create and play using microbits. The radio games for Microbit connect multiple microbits together for a game. Those are good group activities, but they do require the physical microbit for that one. There are also some fashion lessons like make your own microbit name badge. So it includes some physical art creation as well as the programming pieces to make the microbit perform as you would desire for it to do. Under music, you've got the ability to make a guitar that you can actually play, which is really neat. But there again, these require that physical device. But there are also science experiments for them. So how can you show states of matter using a microbit with your with what you've created? And so it's really, really neat options there. There are some blocks to JavaScript tutorials here. And again, we have some of those computer science courses that we can use with our students, as well as, how does the hardware work? So for kids that are really interested in that, what does that look like? There's even a whole series called Coding with Teachers that is something that you might be interested in. They have coding cards that are just challenges for students. Great center activities, by the way. And then they have some deep dive things. So all of that is here on this Microbit Makecode page. So I'm going to stop for just a second, Tammy, and see if we have any questions coming in, or if anyone has had any thing they wanted to share.
Yeah, no, they're super excited. People are saying things like, I love this website. This is cool. This is awesome. But we are curious, what do you think the proper grade level is? At what age can a student comfortably come in and start using Makecode?
So I actually have used Makecode kindergarten through 12th grade.
Really? Kindergarten?
Yes.
Do
Now
they need buddies to help them?
With kindergarten, I do use buddies. And the other thing with kindergarten is a lot of times we'll do like demo coding, like with the design, the clovers, for example. That's a really good example of that one because they're not going to have the ability, most kindergartners aren't going to have the ability to read what all of those blocks are saying, right? So
Right.
what I've done with that is we do that design, the clovers. And it's already the program part is done, but then they're able to draw and customize their game. And then your kindergartners that are a little more advanced and go, well, but I don't want it to make that sound that says beep. I want it to make this sound. They can change that because they recognize those words enough to start understanding that that change in the code makes a change later on. And what's been really cool about that is then, in my position, sometimes I'll work with the same group of kids over multiple years. So those same kindergartners that I worked with in Makecode one year, and usually it's hour of code, that's when they call me in to do this. But then a year or two later, they're like, oh yeah, we remember that. And then they go back and we're doing a very similar activity, but they're able to go back and customize that. So that's really, really cool.
That's super awesome. That's great.
And the interesting thing for me, like with middle and high school, is a lot of folks will go, well, then you automatically start with JavaScript or Python, right? And that's not always the case, depending on where they've been. Because I have some high schoolers that when we get started, we start in blocks because they've not been introduced to coding in the way that necessarily you might have expected.
Wow. So it sounds like you can differentiate even within the Makecode world, right? That's super
and I
awesome.
think that's where Makecode, because it naturally has 3 differentiation tiers without you really even having to change the content any on those tutorials, which is really nice.
That's super. We've got about 7 minutes left, so go
Perfect.
for it, girl. Tell us
All
more.
righty. So next up, we are going to look at, I can get the right slide, just talking about some ways you can use this at the end of the year. And one of the things that I love to have students do is to make a game about the class or the curriculum that can then be shared with your next year's students. So maybe it's these are my top 5 survival tips for 5th grade, and you're going to capture the bubbles to get the tips to pop up. Or maybe they're doing a review of World War II, and they're going to do a little bit of content about that in their game. I think that that's a really neat way after they've done some of the tutorials for them to apply that learning they've had in the tutorials into a curricular manner. Another thing that I have loved to have kids do, and I've done this with some of my classes when I've worked with them for like SEL support when they're looking for ways to increase the relationships amongst their students, is they make a game for their classmate based on things they like or based on an interview that they have done with the students. And that has been a really neat way for kids to maybe get to know students that they wouldn't have gotten to know otherwise. You can use Makecode as kind of a storytelling tool as well. So you can use Makecode to tell about your year in sixth grade, or what middle school is like, or those types of things. And then the beauty of it is those links can then be shared with anybody. The teacher can share those links with the next year students, or the student can share them with people that they would like as well. Some of my students, their favorite thing to do is send the game to their grandparents and have their grandparents play the game, which I think is really interesting. And then the final thing that I think is a great way to wrap up the year is to, if you've introduced your students to the Makecode site and they're familiar with it and they kind of have seen it and are interested in it, is to have them say, okay, I want you to take what you know about Makecode, and you're going to create your own project. And we're just going to have a project fair, and everybody's going to walk around and share their project with each other. And I might have Johnny, who created something in Makecode, and have something like Jason created a activity using the Microbit emulator. And then I have somebody that creates something using just traditional Makecode Arcade. And then we've got this kind of coding festival where they're able to share and get excited about all of that content. And I just think that that's a really cool way to engage them in this type of learning, especially in a year where, nothing has been normal. The other thing that I will say about Makecode that I meant to mention at the beginning, because I did mention that it was cross-device friendly, but Makecode is perfect for digital learning because there's nothing that students have to install. So even if they're digital learning using a personal device, they just have to go to the website. So it just works. And I think that that is a really neat way to do that. I would love to hear any ideas that you have after seeing this in the chat, if you want to share that. And then the next thing we have is I actually do have a redeem code for you on the Educator Center. If you would like to receive a little 30-minute credit for your time with us today watching this webinar, it is available for you, and we will pop that in the chat for you so that you can access that. It's T-MEB62C21. And to access that, you go into the education.microsoft.com website. And once that pulls up, if you don't already have an account, if you register for an account on that site, you'll see that you'll be able to sign in and see your lovely picture in the corner, or it'll be your initials or a little smiley. And you click on that, you hit redeem achievement code, and you'll pop that code in there and hit redeem. And that will give you points on that Educator Center, which is a great way to document professional learning that you may have done and that you are looking to access and have access to for your own purposes. And then I do want to leave you with a couple of resources that I think will be beneficial to you. The first one that I will leave with you is just some Makecode resources from Microsoft's website. They are lesson activities and ideas. So let's see what that one comes up for you so that you can see what that page looks like. You'll see that it has some intro courses to Microbit, Minecraft, and making in just general. There's also a blog on Makecode. There's some research on why Makecode and coding is important in the classroom. And then there are developer resources and some other community resources there, as well as the ability to explore that. Additionally, in our resources, there is a Makecode for online learning. That page is completely dedicated to using Makecode in remote learning environments. And then we have the hands-on computing with Microsoft, and those are Makecode resources back on that Microsoft Educator Center. And you'll see that here are some of those courses, but it's linked different parts of courses throughout the MEC so that you have ways to learn not just about physical computing, but also about coding in a lot of different environments. So I think that those resources are really great. And this is a site that a lot of folks miss because they're just looking for different learning paths and progressions, and it's just right there for you. And then finally, Makecode has some more resources for online learning here, and those are just additional things for what students can do in Makecode. So as we are coming to the end of our time, I would like to encourage you to join us next week, and I will let Tammy give you a little more information about what's to come.
Well, yes, next week we have the lovely Victoria Thompson. She is going to be talking about OneNote and Microsoft Teams, the perfect pairing. Although I have to say, Mary, I think we made a perfect pair today. I love everything that you've been sharing with us. And just one quick last question. So is Makecode, can they use that on, like one of these little cellular devices, or does it have to be on
I have programmed an entire game start to finish on my phone before.
Perfect, because not everyone is one-to-one, so it's good to know that you can do it on an iPad or anything, right?
On anything. And that's what's been beautiful, because in my district, we're a pretty mixed environment, and we have very few schools that are actually one-to-one. And Makecode has been a great thing for our bring your own learning device schools, because it works on everything. Android, Apple, doesn't matter.
Which is the kind of great tool the teachers need, our favorite F word free. But Mary, thank you so much for being here with us today on Live from NCCE. Join us next week for Victoria. And everyone who tuned in, thank you so much for being here with us. And we hope to see you next week, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern on Live from NCCE. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mary.